This week on the Three Rings podcast.
If I don't like the look of the current industry, that doesn't mean I still have a right to teach them the old way, because then I'm failing as a teacher.
Do you think that we might see more AI artists or AI type of music, and then it's like, right, we'll create choreography which goes with it?
We're coming into a space with these TikTok dances that we can almost have dance karaoke.
Yeah.
Where people have always been able to get up and sing the songs. No one's ever been able to get up and dance the dances.
Welcome to the 20th episode of the Three Rings podcast. My name's Stuart Bishop, and I'm here with my fellow director, Bailey J. Muir.
Before we dive into things, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, and turn on your notification bell up top so you know all about next week's.
This week's topics are: choreographer and creative director Christian Storm has celebrated his 50th birthday. We ask why him and his generation of dancers are so iconic in the commercial dance world. Then we debate whether it was right for Charm the Donna to post rehearsal footage following Dua Lipa's Brit performance. And then finally, in the light of the recent Gap X Jungle Back on 74 collaboration, we discuss whether this is a sign of where dance is going next. So, Bailey, there seems to be a theme to this whole episode. Why don't you explain what that theme is?
Yeah, this episode's kind of like accidentally become like a timeline of the industry, hasn't it? The first topic reminisces on the old industry. The second topic is very, very centered on the current industry. And then the final topic is a nice little sign of what that next stage of development of the industry could be.
This first topic, it's about Christian Storm, the creative director, choreographer, obviously a legendary dancer in his day. It's his 50th birthday party, and this video that was posted on Instagram and on his socials, on his Facebook, it was just, I don't know, I watched it with it was just amazing video. It just filled me with so much joy and feeling of that is like, if you could say, what could you get from having a dance career, and how can you feel, and where would you go, and what would it be looking like? His party just summed up so much about sort of what you can achieve, I think. Just from, it obviously looked quite lavish, and also just what was in it, this little dance routine that he did. How do you feel about it first, Bailey? And then we can talk about the actual, go more into Christian.
I think it was just so cool to like see them all back together, dancing together again, wasn't it? It's like, for people like me and you that work in the dance industry, it almost, when you're watching it, removes that factor of you look at this as an industry and a career, and actually just takes you back to almost childhood where you're just a fan of dance. That's very much how I felt watching it. It's like, I'm a fan of these people. These are the people that inspired me. And to see them all dancing together, still to this day, all still best of friends, it's just phenomenal. I mean, when you look at the people in the video, like Christian, Matt Webb, Jerry, they surely are icons of the industry to everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just like, I mean, for normal people, most people can't ever get to learn to dance anyway, and, so for someone of his age, still to be killing it, and still to be obviously loving it, it was just a joy to see. It was, and to see, all those different people. There was also I saw Austin Farrell in there as well in the background. It was just like, I feel like, there's someone who has been, he was the, one of the top, he was the dancer. He was the dancer. When I came out of college, it was, he was in everything, every music video, for all the artists, he was always there, front center. Good looking chap. Very successful obviously as a dancer, very successful as a choreographer, married to a pop star, and you can see he's got lots of, he's got a great team around him, and it was just, it was just fantastic to actually watch, and to for him to share that. I'm a Facebook friend. I've only met him maybe a couple of times, but I don't know how we became Facebook friends. But it's been interesting to see from some, from not really knowing him and being given an insight into his sort of like his private life with seeing that. And as a choreographer myself, it was interesting to see, the patterns and because, they're dancing for a long time. He's created sections and they go back on the sections and it's just slick, professional. I wonder how many rehearsals they did. Obviously, in the video, you see them do the rehearsals, don't you? But I bet you, obviously they're all doing it. I'm sure for free as a favour. There's, rehearsal probably would have been tight, and it just goes to show how quick they could get something like that up.
Oh, that's it. It's just a sign of a true professional, isn't it?
Mm.
They're so used to doing that. They're so versed in that style of choreography and everything that they probably can walk in that rehearsal room, watch it once, dance it through once or twice. I'm like, yeah, we've got it. Don't need to worry. And I bet they've probably done that. They'll be like, right, well, we had this rehearsal time, but we're done now, so should we just like go to the pub for the next few hours? Do you know what I mean? They're so versed. It's incredible. I tell you, watching it, it did make me think, when we look at the current industry, I can't imagine a group of people that are around right now being able to be together on their 50th birthday and like be as iconic as that group of dancers back together. And I think that's really interesting to look at. Do you get that same feeling, Stuart? And why do you think that may be, that they're so much more iconic than even feels like there'd be a potential to be today?
Well, I think, they are the last generation of having the advantage of so much TV and programming which featured dance. And it was, there was a lot of artists who was using dancers at that point. So it was I always look back and say that was the golden generation for the commercial world, because not only, and I'm sure it will come back as a cycle. You'll get artists who want to use dancers again, but it was, Top of the Pops, CD UK, the Pepsi chart show, every sort of variety show, whether it was from Des O'Connor to whoever had a show at the time, would have acts which would have dancers on. So for me, being at college, I'm watching these videos and seeing the same people in it. So you get excited because it's like, wow, that's a dancer becoming kind of known. And then obviously when you then hear, that they are with he married Shaznay Lewis from All Saints, you just think, wow, that's the bloody dream, isn't it?
Do you think there's something to be said as well for the fact that they were almost like treated more individually in that era? If we come literally to today's world, it's like actually the majority of the big jobs have gone. But if I reflect back to like the last generation, sort of when I was in training and coming out of training, when we still had X Factor, it was like there was still there a peak job of the commercial industry. But I feel like with X Factor, they were more a team of dancers and they'd be known as the X Factor dancers. Whereas if I look at that Christian Storm, Matt Webb era, for example, Matt Webb was literally known by name to the public as one of Step's dancers. And I can't see a place that really exists in today's industry. Do you think that plays a factor? I guess also it'd be interesting to hear why you think that may have changed. Did you experience the change yourself?
Well, it went from, even though they were using the same people majority of the time, you had people like Paul Demain, Priscilla, Paul Roberts, the choreographers at the time were using, the same sort of groups. There was still more work from what those choreographers had. There was so much. There was so many TV shows. There was so many pop artists using dancers. I do remember that the moment CD UK and Top of the Pops went, well, Top of the Pops first, I think that went, and then CD UK, it suddenly, you could feel the drop. People were looking at where else could we get work? Because the opportunities to do TV and to do tours were getting far and fewer between. I think when you look at like X Factor, it's very much they're focusing on the artist. They're focusing on just, they're not focusing on creating a team at that point. They're focusing on just getting the artists through to the next round. So, whatever it takes, they're not caring about loyalties. And I think, when you look back at sort of the Steps era, especially, I think it does good for people to be able to not only follow the artist but follow the dancers and know everything about them. And it was just why would you have anybody else? They were so tight. It's gone.
Do you think there could also be something in play where, I don't know if this is the case, which I'll ask you, but was it harder to like reach the top in that sort of 90s, early 2000s era of being a dancer because there were less people? Because then when I look at that 2010s with X Factor, see, that's kind of what I was expecting to come out of college into. And I was convinced I would be able to be one of those dancers, basically because there was so many. I know there's going to be 20 a week. When it gets to the final, they'll draft in another 50. I know I'll be one of those. Whereas when I look at that 90s, early 2000s and imagine coming out in that time, I can't imagine being as confident that I would reach the top because there was less places for dancers, even though dancers were more important to those artists, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Is that a fair observation, or do you think it was easier?
No, I think it's a fair observation because there was more opportunity for dancers. So if you weren't making it to at the very top, then there was something to sort of, it doesn't matter because there was still loads of other stuff to do. So in that regards, I think it's harder now because perhaps there isn't as much work out there. But I remember when I came out thinking, God, that is really tricky to break into that thing, and that was one of the reasons for me. I can't speak of everybody else, but there was one of the reasons why I thought, right, well, I need to create my own castle and become king of that, and my own sort of brand and thing. So if I fail of getting in with these type of groups, which ultimately I did, because I did a few artists, dancing for a few artists, and I did a few commercials, and my dance career, you could say, was successful. It was only a year and a half, and I was definitely working, but I could see that these guys at that point, excuse me, were a step above. I think because of their familiarity with each other. So to be able to get in with that group, and get in with those choreographers, I think it was a daunting task. I mean, it was something that I wasn't prepared to wait around for 3-5 years to see if it happened. Where I think a lot of people did and never actually got to that top and got to dance, with those kind of dancers and artists.
Yeah, I guess in a sense it was easier to see what the top looks like as well, because the top would all be together. Whereas now it's almost like the top also have everyone else around them as well, because it's always on such a mass basis. I think on this topic of like which era was harder is almost really sad to speak about in literally today's industry as well. Because even though we go 90s is harder than 2010s, I honestly don't think it's ever been harder than today's dance industry, because there is just so little now. Obviously, as you're saying there, in the 90s, there was more volume of work. So even the ones that weren't at the top would be able to. 2010s, then you got the likes of X Factor come around, that then there weren't really a top, but what was the top was big enough to kind of support a very, very vast amount. Whereas now, when I look at like sort of the calendar year, there's the Brit Awards and the Royal Variety that I look at as like big commercial jobs, and they're both one night. At least X Factor was like a solid 3 months at the end of every year.
Yes.
it really makes me wonder where all that work went.
Well, what you have to remember also, a key factor was there was not as many dancers, especially boys, especially boys. I sometimes think, if I came out now as a dancer, would I even get any type of opportunity? Like, because the standard of boys, and I'm not talking about people like Mark Webb or Christian Storm or Jerry Reed. The standard of the boys was nowhere near as good as it was of today, because there just wasn't the amount of competition. We were very technical, but they're just you didn't, if you were half good looking and half good, you were probably going to work as a boy. Nowadays you need to be very, very good, and you didn't also have I know I bang on about this, but you didn't have hundreds of colleges. So there was an industry. You could see it. It was there. There was, whether it was at the studios or in rehearsals or at jobs or at events, you saw the people, you saw the dancers, you saw the choreographers who were working. Today it just seems like not the Wild West, but just a vast plain of just bits here and there.
It's like you're like walking through like empty land and suddenly you found a deserted town. That literally feels like the dance industry from the pandemic, which I think is probably a financial effect more than anything, that they just can't afford to do these mass productions the majority of the time that then require dancers to enhance it. For example, with the Brit Awards, that's just, for us now, it's gone this past week. By the time you're watching it, it'll be 2 weeks ago. I felt like you could very much tell watching the Brit Awards that the budget was lesser than in previous years. For example, Dua Lipa's performance, it was still great, but it didn't feel like it had the budget that, for example, Little Mix's Woman Like Me did when it was on, 5-6 years ago now. You can feel an effect there. It's really interesting to see. Now, falling on Dua Lipa, I know you had some thoughts about that, didn't you? Donna, the choreographer, had posted, I think it was 2 days after the performance, weren't it? She put out on Instagram rehearsal footage of then the piece that was performed. And you weren't particularly happy with that, were you, Stuart? I'm kind of on the other side, but let me throw it your way first. Why did you react in the way you did to that?
I was #triggered by it. I tell you what it was. I swear it was the day after it was either the day after or however, when it was for me way too soon. Now, what it is I don't know. As a choreographer, this is how I saw my career as a choreographer when I was working with artists and working with products and things like that. You don't want your choreography to be seen beforehand. You want your choreography to be celebrated on stage, and then you want, if it needs to come out behind the scenes, the ideal thing, and this is we're going to talk about Jacko later. This is, create a behind the scenes feature, film, or whatever. Now, that's how I think it should be done professionally. And in my head, creativity wise, what's the point showing something beforehand? Because she put out rehearsal footage beforehand as well. So I'm like, as an ex choreographer, well, I'll always be a choreographer, but as someone who worked as a choreographer for 20 years, I'm like, I can't believe that was allowed. Now, when I then went off at you about it, it was like completely, you didn't shut me down or completely disagree, but I was not expecting what you said. Why don't you say your stance on it and why?
Yeah. So I don't want to say that like Charm's choreography weren't artistically great, but I don't think.
Hang on, no, you can't say that sentence and then go but. Go on.
Like, I think she did an incredible job of it.
Yeah, I did.
But the people setting the briefs, I don't think their intention necessarily is to achieve the greatest piece of art. I think the intention coming from, let's say it's a record label that set the brief.
Mm.
If you're choreographing for a music artist, your job basically is to enhance the sales and streaming numbers of that song. So I think actually the posting of the rehearsal footage, teasing the fact they're in rehearsals beforehand, builds this sort of hype period for the performance, which then really actually fulfills the brief. They're not doing that Brit Awards performance for the fun of it. Dua Lipa's on there to move records, essentially. It's so funny we still say move records, even though records don't really sell anymore, but you know what I mean. And I think that's the key to it. As a choreographer for a music artist in today's world, your job is actually kind of to help fulfill marketing. If you can create great art within that, which I think Charm did, brilliant. But I don't think that's necessarily your client's intention. Now, I know you took that to Michael Jackson, didn't you, Stuart? Which is interesting to stay in music. So why don't you dive into what you said there?
Well, so you said all that, and I was like, okay, I get it. I understand what you're saying, but I was still not happy because in my head I'm like, well, Michael Jackson wouldn't stand for that. He would not have done that. But you reckon that if Michael Jackson, which I disagree with you, by the way, if Michael Jackson was around today, you reckon that he would be doing this, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's what you have to do in today's industry to then get success. I would say when me and Stuart were having this conversation, I basically said, if you pick Dua Lipa up, drop her in the 80s, 90s, and get her to do exactly what she's trying to do today, that's not going to work. But equally, it goes the other way. Pick Michael Jackson up and drop him in today's industry of what he did in the 90s, for example, that's not going to work. He wouldn't be successful in today's world with that approach. The strategy underneath each approach, I think, is still exactly the same. But the way that presents to meet what the target audience of the time want is very, very different. So I really think he would have done it. Which then I know you mentioned about Michael Jackson releasing rehearsal footage from, was it the Thriller music video?
Yeah, the Thriller. So that was a film in itself, the making of Thriller, you know? I don't know. Because are you saying, Bailey, that today's artists, because when you say that, I see that you're saying today's artists are not good enough to just put out their music or their art and let it talk for itself.
But has any music artist ever just put their music out and then let it do what it wants? That's the reason they used to do all the talk show appearances, for example.
Michael wouldn't do shit unless it was massive. He wouldn't turn up for it. You know, he was never on Top of the Pops ever.
But then there'd still be a hype period created by his marketing team of this music video's dropping at midnight.
Yes.
And you'd all sit and wait. There was still marketing strategy, no matter how great the work was. And I think what's quite interesting there is the fact he put out that rehearsal footage of Thriller within the sort of behind the scenes making of means he was perfectly happy to do it. So how different is that to Charm putting out that rehearsal footage this week? Actually, Michael Jackson in that period didn't have social media, so he had to wait to put it in a documentary. If he had social media, would he not have just put it out at that time? He was clearly willing and wanting to share it.
Well, unfortunately, we'll never know because Michael Jackson is dead. Young people watch you thinking, "Oh, Michael, yeah, he's dead." But I still don't think he would. I think he would come. I don't know. Maybe. You know, would Prince? I can't see Prince being all over social media. I can't. But I think if he was still alive, and he was to bring out something, I think it. I'm not asking. What I'm thinking is that if one way has been possible before, we're going to go on a cycle. At the moment, the cycle is to show everything. What I'm saying is at some point, someone will come back and go, I'm not doing that. I am good enough to just put something out and people go, boom, wow. And it would just, I can just see it happening. And then people gradually will go, right, yeah, it's not cool to be showing everything anymore. We got to start bringing it back a bit and being a bit cooler. And that's what I think that the future will be.
See, I think change is inevitable, but I think thinking of it in the sense of a cycle implies that it's going to go back to how it was, which I just don't think is accurate. It's never, when you look back through the last 100 years of music, it's never gone backwards. This is why there was probably a point in time that Michael Jackson's putting music videos out, and there's a Frank Sinatra fan sitting there going, Frank Sinatra was obviously better than Michael Jackson because he didn't need a music video. Everything progresses. So I don't think it will go back to how it was. And I don't mean to offend with this, but I think sometimes that feeling of needing it to go back to how it was can actually kind of be a sign of you, in a sense, going out of date yourself in your tastes. I don't think anyone should expect you to keep up with the way the world is going, the way entertainment's changing, and actually like that change. I think particularly working in our industry, if you're going to keep working in it, you have to keep aware of that change. As soon as you get to a point that you're not actually willing to accept it or look at where it's going, it's time to walk away, I would say. Which really interestingly links to, there's a whole article being released by The Stage this week with a teacher from Guildhall School who, when you read the article, we'll drop a link in the description below so you can read it because it's behind a paywall, so we can't actually talk you through it. But essentially, it kind of sounds like between the lines, there's been this like animosity building up in this teacher, just not quite being happy with the way the industry's working, kind of like you are now, Stuart, wanting it to go back to the way it was. And it's built up to the point it almost feels like she's like erupted and stormed out of the college and told everyone else they don't know how to teach, that this isn't proper art. And I kind of get her point, but there is a level there that I guess it's like she's not conscious of entertainment has changed. She's still trying to teach students for an old industry and is getting worried that the other teachers aren't teaching them for the old industry. Without that, I don't know whether it's a realization or just an acceptance that the new industry is very different. What was your take on that sort of story that came out about Guildhall, Stuart?
Well, I straight away thought, this does seem, it's a bit different to the other kind of articles that have recently come out accusing and allegations against certain teachers and people and students and all sort of things. It was more of a kind of, this person's left and they're just not happy. And, you know, if you're not happy, I suppose you can't change where things are going. So going back to what we were talking about beforehand, just to, I suppose, be on the side of the oldies, you can look back and go, right, what did work? What kind of things worked? You know, let's try these things. What you can't do is spend time protesting and go and, you know, and sort of getting down and trying to bring others down and trying to stop others from a natural progression. Now, that doesn't mean to say that this lady could go and create something which could have a not old, but like a more classic kind of feeling, and it could be massive in its own right. But it's going to be less and less where people like that, I suppose, like, you know, people with the same kind of sort of strategy in their heads of how things should be. They're going to get less opportunities to work with newer people, I suppose. But every now and again, the newer people go, hey, let's bring someone back from the old, work with them, because look, it's going to create an amazing collaboration. So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
What you're kind of touching on there, I would describe as it's like there's a level of alignment there that you've got to realise whether you still fulfil the position you're sat in, which I feel like this teacher has had the realization, but had the realization in a negative way rather than a positive way.
Yeah.
So when she's left, it's like she's chucked everyone else under the bus, going that they're all wrong and I'm right, rather than actually having the sort of oversight to see that, okay, they are correct in a teaching sense, because my job as a teacher is to teach the students for this industry. If I don't like the look of the current industry, that doesn't mean I still have a right to teach them the old way, because then I'm failing as a teacher. But then maybe your objectives changed. If you really like the industry in the way it was in the 80s, then in the 80s you were the perfect teacher. But if you want the 2024 industry to still look like the 80s, you're no longer a good teacher. And that is the point to actually go, do you know what? I don't like the way the industry's gone. I now need to step into another role and change this. Because there still is an audience for both sides. An example I love to use of this is like Lion King and the Royal Shakespeare Company. They're actually both telling exactly the same story. But the audience turning up to the Lion King, probably 60-70% would never go to the Shakespeare Company, and vice versa. But the story's the same. So it's positioning yourself in the right area to align with your viewpoint. And I think that's really important to realise. I feel like this teacher has almost spun it in the wrong way, that she's made other people look bad, and in a sense kind of made herself look bad, which didn't need to be the case. Her opinion is valid, and actually most people would agree with it on a level, but it's knowing how to action it, I think, is a real key to this.
Well, now what I would have done is, because she's obviously a very celebrated, well-loved sort of teacher, knowing that she has I mean, it all depends whether she was, we don't know. There might be more to this. We don't know. But if you're leaving to go to do something else, what you don't want to do, because, this person's saying they're going to create a podcast and they're going to, do certain things. The ideal thing is not to be leaving in a cloud of smoke, but in a being celebrated. Oh, brilliant! Not this woman's moving on. Let's celebrate her 40 odd years, and then at the same time, it's a good plug for the new projects. So I think she missed the trick there too. She could have. It could have been dealt with much differently. I think. I think nothing comes good from it all, because her message, I think, then gets lost a bit amongst the sort of the protests of what she's complaining about, and then the bitterness of it, and it's one of the main reasons when me and you started to work together was, it's a huge advantage for me to be working with someone so young, because so I can keep in with what's going on. Do I like what's going on? Not all the time, definitely not. The charm, the donna choreography, it does. I'm like, oh, why would you do that? Why would you want to? It ruins the whole thing. But if Michael Jackson would have said to me, right, you need to post that choreography, I would have done it. So do you think then it's, because obviously if you're doing a commercial, you get told you can't post this until a certain time. And a lot of the time it's common sense. Well, I'm not going to post this because the event is here. So the client's probably going to get annoyed with me if I was to put out stuff, if it's a surprise or whatever. So do you think it's been intertwined into the contract, right? The set amount of rehearsal footage to be shown, stuff like that?
I mean, I've never seen it in a contract myself, so I wouldn't expect it's the case, but equally it wouldn't surprise me if it is the case, because it could definitely be in a contract, and you'd be well within your rights to ask for payment to do that marketing. But I think there is a level there that also benefits the choreographer. If record labels are looking at a choreographer who's posting this rehearsal footage, they're going to go, do you know what? This choreographer is going to be really good for our marketing. This choreographer can create just as good a piece, but aren't actually going to help us with marketing, so we'll pitch on. So it could just be that it goes in her favour, but it could be in the contract.
Yeah, because I can see how, you've got a good choreographer who's got a big social media following. The more content they're putting out of the song being played and rehearsals I can see how that would make more money, for records being sold or tickets being sold and T-shirts and whatever. It's the old, you go see your mum. When you're doing a college show before the show, and your principal goes, "What are you doing in your costume?"
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel very very theatrically morally correct.
Yeah,
it feels just wrong.
What she was putting out before the performance weren't like you could actually see the performance.
Yeah.
It was just teasers that they were in the rehearsal room getting ready for. So it built hype without giving it away. I think the video I think it was Monday she posted it. If she posted that video that was like the actual piece being performed in the rehearsal room beforehand, that would be totally wrong in any era, including today's. But I think once it's been done, actually, again, that's helped driving views back to YouTube.
Yeah.
Which enhance the streaming again.
I don't know. There might be some choreographers who just be like, "Well, this is me. This is my work. I'm going to put it out, whenever I want to." In the end of the day, it is their choreography. However, once someone pays for it, it's in a sense the companies or the artists as well. So yeah, it'd be interesting to know. I mean, I loved all the. I'm getting into Dua Lipa, I have to admit. I think just because she does seem to be one of these artists, really, she puts a lot into it. She's no Michael Jackson, obviously, but
and see, this is a good thing that you can still get into it and embrace it. Do you know what I mean? That is a great example of like the opposite to this teacher at Guildhall, that you're willing to try and stay up to date with it, which I think you've got to be willing to do. If you're going to keep working in entertainment, you have to understand how the current generation think about entertainment.
Absolutely.
For example, there's so many of the sort of older generation in the dance world that would be disgusted if I turned around to them and said my inspiration is Marty Kudelka, and they'd probably be like, "No, it has to be Jerome Robbins." And it's like, hold on, no, Jerome Robbins is your inspiration because that's someone you could have worked with when you came out. Me coming out, I could have worked with Marty Kudelka. So actually, Marty to me is Jerome to you. I still appreciate Jerome's work, but I don't have to have the same inspiration as you. We're 30, 40, 50 years apart. And I think it's really good that you can still understand that and accept it. There's definitely a problem that comes with some people that can't, which I think is what happened in this Guildhall sense. Yeah. It's quite interesting to observe.
So the other side of this is that there is this underlining sort of common theme of people saying maybe the artists, the actors, the dancers are just not as good. Now, that seems like a very kind of mum, your parents, that sort of thing would say when they say, "Oh, yeah, my day, blah, 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 blah." But the art of dance is definitely getting eroded. We're not seeing as much technical dance on stage. And definitely in our studios here in the UK, it's full of just commercial kind of, I don't know, commercial styles. I don't know what the style really is, what you'd call it now. But just commercial styles. So, I'm trying to push over the argument of, well, I firmly believe Michael Jackson, Prince, some of these massive artists just would not have done as much as, you see Elton John. Why was it so big when he did Carpool Karaoke with James Corden? Because you don't see him do much, Now, maybe that's a bad example because you're going to say, well, he's very, he's old now. I think he must be in his 70s, maybe. So
I think this question of like good and bad as well is also a very linear way of thinking, which is sometimes a bit of a trap. Because on that dance level, like you're saying, of like there's not as much technical dance, that doesn't necessarily mean that was better. For example, if you take West Side Story and something Marty Kudelka choreographed and put them side by side, Marty's choreography is going to be, in my opinion, it's going to have way more style, but West Side Story is going to be way more technical. So actually, both are good in their own right. And it's one of these things: can you actually compare them? Can you really say one is better than the other? Because they're not trying to be the same thing. I think that's
Yeah.
also something that's important as you kind of go out of date. Which even myself, like, I'm still young, but I can still look at certain things, but don't get that. It's important to try and keep on top of when you're working in this space, not to make comparisons to something that isn't comparable. Actually, everything is good in its own artistic right, because this is where art really is perception. You can't
Mm.
you can't put a grade on art. I always say, if you think in school you've got maths and English, maths is always a right answer. English, it's interpretation. I feel like dance is English. No one's opinion is correct, but it's correct to yourself. I think that is something really important to always try and stay on top of. Even if you don't like a work, it doesn't mean that work is bad.
Well, we've talked about some, with reminiscence of sort of the old dance industry. For when I say the old, it's the old dance industry for me. The industry I remembered when I went out. For you, it would have been the generation, the golden generation that you would have heard so much about, and you've been taught by, very inspired by Mark Webb, haven't you?
Yeah. I was taught by Mark and James Robinson, so I very much know all the stories, all the ins and outs of it. And obviously, as a kid, they were the ones that I'd watch on TV that were part of my inspirations to start dancing as well. So for you, it was probably they were like your ones, college days, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then we've talked about what's happening right now. So we should talk about then the future. Let's go on to the Back on 74 Gap advert. Now, why is this so? Well, actually, let's talk about their Brit performance first. What did you think of the Brits performance?
I thought it was brilliant. I think it's fascinating to see how important that choreography is to the success of the band. When you watch, for example, the camera work, the focus is all on the dancers, which, coming from a dance background, I absolutely love to see. However, I did then note when Jungle won their award, they did thank their dancers, but they never thanked their choreographer, never mind name checked him, which I would challenge. I think that's wrong. I don't want to sort of diminish the value of their art, but I think they have a hell of a lot to thank of the dancer and the choreographer for their success. The song is good, but usually in music, I would say that the dance complements the song, the dance complements the band. I think here it's the other way around. I think the band and the song actually play second fiddle. The song complements the dancers. The dancers are the important part in this, which is rare. How about you, Stuart? What was your take?
Well, it's very interesting because I've come in, like many people, we've come to seeing and knowing who Jungle is from dance. Without seeing that video and seeing the dancers and loving it, I would have no idea who Jungle was. Now, I still had no idea when I watched the Brit Awards. I was like, okay, they've got someone singing in the background. When they're going to bring on the act? When they're going to bring on? When they're going to bring on the dancers? That's Jungle. And then when I looked into it, it's two guys, and they've brought on a woman vocalist later on, and they were there on stage. But it was just, I don't know. I was just lost with when they came up and they talked and all that, and yeah, absolutely. I can't believe they didn't say anything about the choreographer because I don't think they'd be standing there without that choreography, without the dancers. And I mean, we're going to talk about the Gap advert. The Gap advert, they're not even in there.
Yeah,
So,
well, this is it. Even the original music video, I don't think they're in. If they are, the fact we haven't recognised them tells you everything you need to know.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Which is cool, which is brilliant, which is, funky, which is, I bet you, amazing for them. They can still go around and probably not get recognised. I always think that about Daft Punk. They had so much success. you wouldn't know what they look like.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit. I don't know. Were they expecting to win? Maybe not. So if you're going to the Oscars and you've been sort of hey, look, make sure you've got a speech. Maybe they were just very surprised and they just forgot. But to me, the choreography is everything. Now let's go on to then why we're talking about them particularly. The Gap advert. So what is this?
So the original music video for Back on 74, Gap have basically picked it up and got them to do a new version of it, wearing Gap clothing. And they've also brought in another music artist called Tyler to then dance in it with them as part of a new campaign for Gap's new range, which I just thought was absolutely fascinating and almost presents a new avenue for success within dance, kind of a new genre of work, where I described it as the choreography has secured a brand deal, which has never really happened before. Obviously, you've had these TikTokers doing dances that have secured brand deals, but that's about the TikTok dancer, that's not about the choreography. This is very, very different. Now, if you take it to a technical level on the contracts, I'm sure the brand deal is probably with Jungle, not with the choreographer, with the dancers. They've probably just been paid normal rates. Don't know that for a fact, but I'd expect. But nonetheless, it presents the potential that choreography can still be iconic enough to get booked like that, which I think is definitely something we should look to try and explore and expand upon as an industry. And it relates back to this fact that what's going on with Jungle right now is the normal music industry flipped. For example, Dua Lipa on the Brits would go, that performance was Dua Lipa and her backing dancers. Jungle, it's way more presented as the dancers and their backing band. The dancers and the choreographer are what's brought that brand deal forward, I would say, regardless who's really received the financial benefit. I think it's huge for the industry. What's your take, Stuart? Do you think it could be the future?
Well, I couldn't get my head around it at first because especially then when I found out the Jungle weren't I just had. It's been such a mystery from when you first introduced me to the song, to who they are, what they are, and then for them to see this sort of Gap advert, which doesn't feature the group but has another artist in. It's extraordinary. It's a little bit like. Now, I'm not this old, but it's a little bit like, using Pan's People or Hot Gossip on Top of the Pops back in the day when they didn't have the artists. The artists didn't travel, weren't there in the studio. They would then have dance groups. It's exciting. I'm not sure, and I don't really want to be too confident and sort of make predictions on whether it's choreography. Yeah, I mean, it is basically the choreography that's got the brand deal.
Yeah. I think of it in a sort of vein of when we look back to probably about 2015, when, for example, Tobias Alhammer was doing his concept videos. What's happened with Jungle makes me think, do those concept videos today, you can sell them to brands.
Yeah.
It presents an unexplored potential that I don't know that it will be the future, but if the industry taps into it, I think it will. I think it's really important to capitalize on this moment. If we tap into it, it will be, I would say.
Do you think that we might see more AI artists or AI type of music, and then it's like, right, we'll create choreography which goes with it? I think, I don't know if Beyonce has done it or not, but her Texas Hold'em, is there choreography to that? I think that would just be, I could see it now on because I've been to Houston and I've been in the cowboy bars or whatever they're called. I could see that song being huge, and what you're saying is there a dance to it yet?
I've not actually watched the music video now, which I'm quite ashamed to say. I don't know why I haven't gone and watched that, because I usually always would have. However, there is a TikTok dance to it, which is huge and everywhere.
There you
And
go.
that is exactly your sign. Something I've been saying the last few weeks, I don't know if I've said it on the podcast yet, is also we're coming into a space with these TikTok dances that we can almost have dance karaoke.
Yeah.
Where people have always been able to get up and sing the songs. No one's ever been able to get up and dance the dances. We're in a space now that we can do that. I feel like with these TikTok dances, with what's going on with Gap, we are coming to a point that dance can sit on the same level as music. And again, what you've said there with AI, I'd never thought of that. But again, that's something that can really enhance dance, because that is definitely going to become a thing. Faceless artists, AI. So they're going to need these dancers to back it up. I think we are really coming into a space that dance is ready to explode. It's so needed in a world that otherwise isn't going to have faces. And all of these things coming around, the fact you can now do dance karaoke, all the signs are there that we can now place on the same level. Something I keep talking about since Rick's episode is these TikTok dances being done by everyone. You can attach rights to them, just like what Rick was touching on with rights for choreography as opposed to the music industry. We're coming to a space that we can mirror, which I think is really, really interesting to see where that goes and how to capitalize on it.
Yes. Well, it's been interesting. It's been interesting talking about the old, what's now, and new. May I just say, when we're talking about Christian Storm, although we're talking about him from an iconic era, he's still smashing it.
Oh yeah, still top of the industry.
Do you know what? Every time I open my Facebook, it's another stage show. It's it's a Saturday night lottery. It's a football FA Cup. What? Yeah, he's smashing it. He's smashing it. So, which is good to see. You know, I always think if you've still got the energy, then go for it. I when it came to choreography, it's a lot of energy to keep going. It's a lot of energy. I mean, this is why I think he's more now the creative director, because it's as a choreographer, you know, when you're jetting about here and there all the time, especially if you want to have a family and stuff like that, to be going away all the time and short little contracts here and there, it's you have to have the energy for that. It's just amazing to see that video. And then let's we should get Christian Storm on there. We should get Charm on there, and then we should try and get Jungle to explain themselves why they didn't name check the choreographer, because a name check of a choreographer at an award show that you know, especially if it's a massive artist, that could change your whole life.
And the respect that the public have for Shea's choreography right now. Actually, if they were just told his name, he's going to blow up, because everyone actually wants to know who he is. I know thanks to TikTok, he is kind of getting name checked anyhow, so it is known. But saying it on the Brit Awards is such a different level. It's a real shame that he didn't get that.
Yes, and then as for Charm posting, I don't know if I could ever get used to it. I know you're right though. I know it's all about shifting records and selling tickets and that. I just feel like sometimes it's a bit like, you know, when I say people used to post previews of their photo shoots, and I'd be like, well, hang on, when you then post it, I've seen it already. Like, just I don't know, you know, I don't know. I'm just not. I'm struggling to want to show everything of my life.
Sure, but I don't think you have to.
Yeah,
I think it's your own choice.
Yeah, well, I'm not. No one's interested in my life.
Yeah,
but if I was, it just seems like just so much effort. I mean, you know, because you got to have someone walking about with a camera all the time, and do you know what I mean? If you've got that amount of success, I'm like, right now I'm this successful, this rich. I just want to be left alone now. Yeah, let me enjoy my gold taps and my nice bathroom and my nice this and that and all that. And
the thing is, if your success is built on that, the second you stop doing it, your success will run out.
This is it.
I mean, the current world, the only way to build the success is to show everything.
This is it. This is it. This is it. Yeah. But yeah, it can't be good for mental health though, you know.
I don't know. I bet in Charm's case it is, because the love she gets putting that out. I'd be walking around like the king of the world.
Yeah, when you're up, it's great.
Oh, yeah.
But don't you have, like Kim Kardashian, when they do the Kardashians, there's points where they're downs and they're crying and oh God, I just wouldn't want all that showing. But would you want someone with camera coming in, following you about all the time?
I think in today's world, it's the price of success.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Wow.
No one wants that down moment, but actually everything that you have around you probably, in perspective, makes that down moment worth it.
The next marketing genius will be able to do it. Will be able to market whatever they're doing without having to do all that. That's where I firmly believe there will be someone in the future who will go, but you're saying to get to that level of fame to be able to do it. Oh, I don't know.
Only in today's world, though. This is what I say. It won't go back to how it used to be, but it will change. I don't know what that change looks like, but it's not always going to be the way that you have to show everything. Which, in a scary sense, maybe you have to show even more. Like, I look at some of these live streamers now that sit on stream for 4 hours a day. That's very different than even that minute TikTok that a Kim Kardashian would put up, or an hour TV show. It may even become more and more, but equally, it comes a point that runs out and someone has to do something else to be different. So it will change. I don't think it'll regress, but it won't always stay like it is right now either.
Because it's the power of attraction, isn't it? It's like, if you are the only one in the room saying nothing, people are going to be interested in you. Why isn't he sharing? Who's he? There was a guy on the tube last night, an old guy, right? I reckon he was in his 70s or even 80s, but he looked like a gangster. He didn't move his eye line the whole time. Scary. And I just wanted to go up to him, but I didn't have the balls to say, who are you? What do you do? What's in your briefcase? He was so serious looking. I don't know whether he was a friend of one of the Crays or something like that, but it made me want to look at him. That's where I'm going to leave it, you know?
I think the only thing with that is, how do you get big enough for someone to care that you're not doing anything? For example, when Dua Lipa clears out her Instagram feed now, it works that there's nothing on her Instagram and everyone's going, why is there nothing there? But she's had to show everything to get to a point that people care.
Yeah.
And I think that's the tough balancing act. If you're sat on your sofa not putting anything out, then no one knows you're actually there. They're not wondering why you're not putting anything out. It's a really tough balancing act in a marketing sense.
Well, it'll be interesting to know what our hordes of viewers are thinking. What do you think? Put the comment down below. Do you agree? Should choreographers be putting out their work straight away? Are you a choreographer? Have you had a contract where you've been told to do certain things before? I know we haven't. It's always been, you've got to hold, don't post until beforehand. But things change, and nowadays it's just interesting how everything can be monetized.
I have seen one contract where they were asked to put out a trailer as part of the marketing, which kind of links with it. And that's where I say it could happen.
Yeah.
But it's not common.
No. One thing I do know is that whatever people are doing, they should try and follow a spiritual path. I say this just to link back to our fantastic episode with Daniel Hayden. If you haven't watched that, then do watch that. It was a brilliant episode, as well as all our other guest episodes. We've got Charlie Bruce, Ricky Cheer, and many more. Well, I say many more. Not that
Two
many
more.
Two more.
Brendan Hansford, Adrian Gates.
Yes. Basically, we're now not saying them because otherwise it looks like we're just naming everyone. We're being too transparent there. But yes, over a period of time, there'll be so many guests. We've got some great guests coming up as well, actually. I wish I could say it, but I don't want to. Every time we have said, oh, we've got sort of gone any type of hinting who it is, they've cancelled on us or something's happened. So we ain't saying shit, but we have got some good ones coming. Bailey, last thoughts on anything we've talked about today?
I think my last thoughts really is it's just very interesting to observe this arc of the industry. And I think it's good to emphasise this state of the industry we're in today is very related to that pandemic with the financial side. It's not that people have given up on dance. And I think that's what the Back on 74 stuff shows. Actually, I know we've been saying this for kind of 4 years as an industry, but give it time to rebuild. It is coming back. Don't give up on dance careers to anyone else out there thinking, is it time to leave? There's not enough work. It will come back. Even when Top of the Pops went, X Factor came. There will be something that takes over that space again. And production have basically rebuilt the budgets now, so it'll be any time now. Just hold out is my last thoughts. How about you, Stuart? Well,
I always say if you love what you're doing, but you're not getting the opportunities, I knew that it was going to be tough to break into that Christian Storm and those kind of dancers. So I'm like, well, how can I get jobs myself? So if you love what you do, but you don't feel you're getting that opportunity, then build that opportunity yourself. There's always work out there to be created. That's what I'd say.
So before you leave us today, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, turn on the notification bell so you know when we're back, hopefully with a guest episode next week. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for watching. See everyone next week.
See you later, Bailey. Take care, everyone.